Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's show on AM 1320 and also on the web at WFHR.com. We also welcome our friends from RCCA Media as they're here to digitally record our discussion because Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink is here, and he's going to have some special guests as well, and you can view our session today 24/7 online at rccamedia.org or go to Charter Channel 985 or Solaris Channel 3. With that, we welcome Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Carl.
Okay.
To our listeners.
Okay, so let's talk about Common Council last night, get some business out of the way, and then I'll let you introduce. We're going to start off by talking about the airport.
Well, we had one item of business that moved from February to March, and that was the introduction of the RGGI president, Steve Anderson. He is the newly seated president of the Regional Economic Growth Initiative, the group that's been assembled for a number of years now, looking at ways to grow our local economy. That group is comprised of a board of directors, of which representatives from funders like the city and the county, as well as a number of business representatives are working on that initiative. So that's been moved to March. So individuals looking to hear about that group's progress and what they've been up to will want to watch for the March City Council meeting, March 19th, for that update from Steve. And then as far as other routine business, so to speak, we had a couple of events that the City Council approved, some liquor licenses as well as some street closures. The first being Community Theater is planning, in conjunction with a number of other community partners, maybe you've heard on some of your other shows, the Artie Gras.
Oh, yeah, we've already been promoting it here on the station.
Great, yeah, it's going to be a 10-day arts festival. It's going to be a really great opportunity for people in the community to participate in a whole variety of fashions, not just your visual arts and things. And
they got a state tourism grant.
Yeah.
Well, you and I were at the same event where Stephanie Klett was there to present the check.
Right, yeah, not only that grant, but they also got an arts board grant from the state. So the state's heavily invested in this, and I think it's going to be a great event, not only for our local residents, but people coming to the community, as this has been marketed statewide now. So that's a 10-day event, and obviously welcome visitors around that time frame in March. The Artie Party was the one item that we approved last night, and that's going to be March 19th in the Riverwalk area. And then we've got an event for Blossom Fest. In addition to Blossom Fest this year, the Southwood County YMCA is moving a run to the downtown, and that's happening in conjunction with Blossom Fest on June 18th. So our runners and walkers in the community will want to watch for that event and get registered for that. I know those are always a good time. That one's starting and ending at Whitterfield and then running between the bridges. So that'll be a cool route. A little bit different than past runs. And so that sort of takes care of routine business. There was an action item on the fare structure for River City's cab, and after some analysis, it was determined that it's been years since any rate adjustment has been had at the cab service. And as we know, costs increase annually, and the cab service hadn't increased its rates. Well, that had a trickle-down effect on the wages that the cab company could pay their drivers and their dispatchers, etc. And we also took an adjustment really to non-city resident fares. Because it's a share ride taxi service that our city residents are subsidizing, we encourage them to take a good look at what impacts out-of-town trips are having on the service. The service has just exploded in its usage in the last number of years, and we've had delays, and they acknowledge that. And so we felt that for residents who are looking to use that service, our city residents should be getting first priority. And so rates were adjusted accordingly, and so that happened. And that'll be reported ultimately to the March 15th council meeting. But that's an item that was taken up by the Finance and Property Committee. How
much would the rates differ, or how much?
It's about 25 cents.
Okay.
There's some agency fares which are billed to the county and to the state for those on assistance as well, or have a payer. And so those were adjusted a little bit higher. But as far as impact to city residents on a cost basis, it was much less than the agency fares and the out-of-city riders.
Okay. Well, with that, we have the new airport manager with you today.
We do, and thought it was a good opportunity. Jeremy's now 6 weeks fresh on the job, and thought it was a good opportunity to bring him on for a few minutes on the show this morning, just to introduce him and have him tell us a little bit about himself and what he sees maybe as opportunities and such for the airport.
With that, we welcome Jeremy Sickler for the new manager of the Alexander Field Airport. Well, first off, welcome to the community, Jeremy. Why don't you introduce yourself? Where did you come from?
Well, that's kind of a long story. I grew up in Wittenberg, Wisconsin, so not far from here, a little over an hour away. Undergraduate degree in business at UW La Crosse. Worked in La Crosse for a couple of years at Menards, for the Menards Corporation in their lumberyard. And a friend of mine got me into flying, introduced me to his lifestyle. He was a charter pilot, so I took some flight lessons per his request or per his recommendation, and worked my way from student pilot to working at Central Wisconsin Airport as a line supervisor for FBO charter company that was working there. Continued my flight training when I was there, and ultimately had an opportunity to go back to grad school for aviation management, and got my master's degree in airport management. So
Wow.
From there I worked for 2 years for a consulting company, airport consulting company in Denver, and then beyond that, the previous 8 years I was working in Burnett County, Wisconsin, Siren, Wisconsin, managing their airport up there.
Okay. So you've been on board now for a while. You've gotten a chance to see what you are going to be working with here. What's your first impressions of Alexander Field?
Alexander Field and the area in general are quite a bit different than where I just came from. It's a very rural town. The airport caters to a more, if you want to call it, the tourism in the area.
Okay.
There's a lot of lake homes, a lot of traffic that comes up out of the Twin Cities to that airport for their weekend activities and stuff like that. So there it's very recreational, very touristy, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
Here I think it's quite obvious that the focus of the airport, at least one of the focuses of the airport, is to capture and maintain the business activity that's taking place in the Rapids and certainly the bigger central Wisconsin area.
Given that you're coming in at a time when there's some major developments happening, and one of the things is Sand Valley, and as we were talking about prior to going on the air today, the Sand Valley golf course development on their website already lists Alexander Field as the primary airport for private planes wanting to come to fly to play at Sand Valley. And the folks that are unfamiliar, who developed this are the same people who developed Bandon Dunes. So what's that going to be like for you with the increase in traffic?
Well, even through the interview process and in my first 5.5, 6 weeks here, it's been made very obvious that that's a focal point of trying to keep up with or head off the the expected amount of traffic that's going to come along with that. So granted, there will be some growing pains as that happens, but like you said, it's very likely that a lot of the traffic that comes in for using that facility is going to land here, and I think that we, like them, want to make sure that there's all the services and amenities are available, and it's a red carpet event from the time the wheels hit the ground till the time they take off again. Okay,
well, I'll ask both you and the mayor about this, because we're talking about jet traffic in many instances, private corporate jets and stuff like that. Can Alexander Field handle that kind of traffic?
Well, the neat part is the asset is there, right? It was there for all these other purposes over the years, and primarily the paper industry, but other industries as well. The length of the runway is adequate for usage that they're projecting. Now, when rubber meets the road in terms of having that asset and preserving it and making sure it's maintained and stays available for use, there's a lot of details that go into that, from obstruction clearing that we've talked about on your show related to tree removal. That's the primary obstructions that are concerned governing the FAA and the airport's operation in the future. And so we have to keep a routine maintenance cycle on those things so that way we can maintain good, what's called minimums and approach lengths, so folks that do use the airport find it as a worthwhile experience and a positive experience, because we've found and we've learned that these corporate flyers have options, right? They can fly to Stevens Point, which is 20 miles away, and folks will drive here. They can fly into Seaway or even Wausau's airport downtown. So there are options when folks are considering where to fly into, and so we need to make sure that Alexander Field remains the most competitive alongside those other general aviation airports that could be options.
Okay. What amenities don't we have that you think we will need going forward?
Well, from an infrastructure standpoint, you mentioned the runway and its length and its capabilities. Certainly, it's not adequate for any or all corporate type aircraft. So potentially, if there's a way to make that runway more substantial, I don't know if lengthening it is much of an option, but making sure that it can bear the weight of some of the heavier aircraft, and the ability to service those aircraft when they're on the ground, making sure that they have adequate fueling capabilities and capacities, just people being there to help them when necessary, transportation, and like I said, aircraft services like ground power, heat in the winter, air start for the engines if they don't want to use their battery power on board. So.
Okay, so is that going to require in the future some investment or some support from the state or what?
Well, there's no question the commission, obviously, which governs the financials of the airport, has begun to have Jeremy kind of put together a short list of things that we might need in the near term, and then develop kind of a wish list as we go along. Because we're a federally obligated airport that does receive federal and state aid, there are things we can ask for state and federal support for. So next year, there'll be a project that will happen that'll reconfigure some of the taxiway access in one area. It's not ideal the way it's constructed now to the way FAA likes it. So there's going to be some improvements, and the nice thing about that is 90 to 95% of those of that project cost will come from the state and the federal agencies to support us to do it. So our local cost share is very small. Obviously, there are federal tax dollars and state tax dollars, so it's nice to have them come back to our airport. But they are federally obligated, and we are entitled to some of that aid. But there are kind of narrow categories of which the state and feds will support, because there are so many airports. They have to really be picky and choosy about who they and what improvements they fund.
What about the type of services, having somebody there at the airport at night? If there's a flight coming in, a bunch of people are flying in to either go to Sand Valley or go to Hotel Meade or whatever, and we're a small airport right now. There might be used to being able to talk to a human being at 8 at night or whatever.
Jeremy can talk about the process of which we know about those situations in advance.
Yeah, well, I guess one would hope that they would try to keep in touch with us, make sure that we're aware that they're going to be here, in which case I'll make myself available as necessary, after hours, before hours, on call, if you want to call it that, on weekends, things like that. And I don't know that it's been specifically discussed yet, but it might be one of those things where in the future additional staffing might be a necessity if this becomes such a regular occurrence that one person can't keep up with it.
Yeah, because I've heard what happened in Bandon. You and I were talking about this before we went on the air. What happened to Bandon, Oregon, their little airport, their little airfield there, when all of a sudden this golf development out of nowhere in Oregon became a hot place to be for golfers from around the world. All of a sudden they had to upgrade their airport facilities, and we have the advantage of knowing what the history of these developers and what they're trying to do and their past record, so we can kind of prepare for that, what we're hoping will happen. So,
well, I was just going to say, yes, you're absolutely right. Bandon, actually, they did a lot of assistance with the development of that airport, being forthright, and seeing this coming from 3-4 years away and realizing that there wasn't a good option for inbound flights. I think here they recognize that there already is a very good existing facility here. We do need to do a little bit of work, but I don't see I think they already see that there's a good airport nearby.
Gentlemen, do you think people understand the importance of having an airport like Alexander Field, or do we need to do a better job of getting that education out to the public?
Well, I think any infrastructure asset's a challenge for anybody, doesn't have any exposure to it on a day-to-day basis that realizes it, right? Because if you drive by the airport on a regular basis, you may not see users, right? And so you wonder, why do we have an airport and why is it worth investing? But I'll tell you, having that asset available to the region is critical. And you won't have developments like Bandon Dunes or even other manufacturing or an industry, because they require that type of travel, because it's cheaper, more efficient for them to fly their executives or groups around in a basis such as that. So I think an airport is no different than a lot of other infrastructure assets, where people don't necessarily on a day-to-day basis realize the value that it has to a region.
How many flights are in and out of or business-related flights are in and out of Alexander Field on a regular basis? Have you got any figures or?
I mean, they obviously switch from season to season and even year to year. I think what I'm seeing is kind of a lull here, both here and just nationwide, that business aviation in general is kind of slow. But according to FAA estimates that I've seen, 20, 30 operations a month isn't unreasonable to expect, that which means 10 to 15 planes a month landing there for business purposes.
I've seen some pretty big planes going by there sometimes, and you go, okay, that's somebody here doing some business in town.
Common events are industry that's based here bring groups in for Gulf days. I mean, that's not uncommon to see 3 jets on the ramp in one given day in the summertime as they're trying 2 or 3 different courses out in the area. I know Gulf is beyond Bandon Dunes today, or Sand Valley even here today, that they're already using the courses here because they have industry based here and they want to bring folks to the community. So that even your neighbor over here, Wisconsin Dehydration, they had a group in. They were playing golf for the day, and so it's interesting to see that their footprint and their impact here is beyond just their facilities.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't think we understand So what's going to be the first immediate need, do you think, we need to address?
Being that the airport hasn't had a resident staff manager for decades, as far as I know. The previous managers were contract managers that were also business owners out there. Just getting the airport equipped and tooled up and with some resaleable items that oils and stuff, just to make sure that we're ready to conduct business as on a daily basis out there, which the previous managers did as their own business. So
okay.
The commission is discussing, talk about local impact, and I think understanding of that asset. I know Jeremy in the interview process shared with the commission when we were doing interviews that there's opportunity to get the local community engaged with the airport, even if they're not enthusiasts or pilots themselves. So taking a look at like the old hangar, the old corporate hangar that's out there, and restoring that to a more usable state where groups can use it. So those are things that the commission has started to discuss, and bringing back events to the airport, big and small. It doesn't have to be all large events, but capitalizing on the airport in the lull periods where we could invite the community and involve the community in that asset.
That's been talked about in the past, but we had the Balloon Festival, remember, and then that went out of business. But people get out there and then they go, "Wow, I didn't realize we had exactly how big this area is."
Yeah, while it isn't a high priority for Jeremy, like as he referred to some of the more high priority demands, I guess, on his early time, but it's certainly a priority of the manager to.
Some of the clearing, is there additional clearing work that's going to be happening this spring?
Won't be happening this spring. It's likely going to happen. Well, on airport property, there's some that'll happen this spring in a valley that's off of the east crosswind runway, near Sampson Street. So it's away from the road, but it's still an obstruction area. But there is obstructions off airport, and so all the property owners last year were invited to an open house that we had at City Hall to begin informing them of these things. We're still working through, and Jeremy, that's actually Jeremy's top priority, I would say, is working through that project to better identify exactly where those obstructions are, so we can engage property owners to really, understand and communicate with them, so we can remedy those obstructions.
And these were obstructions the FAA
Correct.
Identified and said these have to go.
And the major driver is the crosswind runway will be
Right.
reconstructed possibly in 2017, but likely in 2018, as I understand. It'll be finished in 2018. When that project is open, the FAA, there's zero forgiveness, right? You either have the obstructions clear and the runway can be reopened, or you don't and the runway's closed. And so therefore, or you don't get federal you don't get the aid from the feds because you weren't compliant at that point.
Okay. So bottom line, we're going to be seeing some type of activity going on at the airport and some changes going on. The folks that are affected by this, who pays for it? Or are they billed for it, or do they get some financial aid? How is that handled?
That's all still to be considered. There are some precedents and ordinances on the books to that effect, but we're looking at this really, 30,000-foot view to say how can we minimize the pain to everybody and ultimately achieve the end result, and that's to get the obstructions cleared. So there hasn't been a determination by the commission on that issue, but it will be coming at some point.
Okay, but at the bottom line, the property owners know about it. They've been informed about it, and they'll be kept up to date about the process that's going to be happening.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, we're going to take our first break of the program, and our phone lines will be open at 715-424-2600 or pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. You're listening to The Morning Magazine and our monthly update with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink. Back with more right after this. The Morning Magazine, as always, is brought to you by Comfort Air.
Good morning, and welcome back to The Morning Magazine, presented by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. It's time for part 2. Once again, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of today's show on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com, and RCCA Media is here digitally recording our segment, which you can view online 24/7 in high definition at rccamedia.org or check your local cable station. The phone lines are open. If you have any questions about the airport or anything for the mayor, it's 715-424-2600, pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. We'll get you on the air. The phone, like I said, the phone lines are open. But we have a second guest, Joe Terry, from Public Works, Your Honor. So,
yeah, Jeremy's boss, I guess, for starters, has joined us. Joe obviously was hired in September as the city's Director of Public Works when we picked that position back up, and so Joe's been at work pretty hard over the last number of months on a lot of projects. Obviously, the Director of Public Works oversees the gamut of all public works activities, from wastewater to streets to engineering to parks, and so Joe's got a pretty big umbrella he covers, and but certainly qualified and has risen to the occasion to make it happen. So wanted to bring him on the show to talk about a couple of things on public works that are sort of on the horizon, and obviously to take calls on whether it's snow removal practices and anything else we can inform.
Yeah, there's always questions about that. Hopefully we don't have to worry about that. Right. But Joe, I can tell you I have noticed some improvement in the street lights. And specifically the one and folks on this side of town know what I'm talking about, at the intersection of West Grand and by the fire station there. And that light sometimes would not change. Sure. And people would end up going through the light, I guess 17th is the street, and they would end up going, I got to get somewhere. I've been here 5 minutes and it's not changing. And so talk a little bit about what you've been doing, analyzing our street lights in town and whether or not they're functioning as efficiently as they should.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on the show. We haven't had a lot of focus on the individual street lights at this point. We try to monitor, make sure everything's working properly, and we're in the process of taking a look at some intersections and doing some capacity analysis and some timing. Obviously, the intersections, the expressway, the goal of the expressway is to move traffic efficiently, and one of the side effects to that is it's for some of the side streets, those lights tend to be a bit short. We're trying to make sure that we can come up with a good compromise that the side street traffic doesn't get too anxious and and start running reds because they don't want to wait the next duration, and balance that with the need to keep traffic flowing on the expressway and through our community.
Okay. The mayor says there are some public works projects on the horizon that you wanted to talk about.
Sure. We've got a pretty good slate of projects coming up this spring. But one of the things on the table right now that's important is some discussion about how we perform our recycling services here in the city. Traditionally, we've had our recycling bins. Our crews come by every 2 weeks and collect dual stream recycling. We separate our paper from the rest of our items, and we have a local vendor that takes that paper. What we're looking at is the possibility of going to an automated single stream. And the reason for that is, there's a number of reasons for that. The efficiency, the work atmosphere for the staff and safety improves greatly if the staff doesn't have to get in and out of the trucks 600-700 times a day. Canisters, our old cans are getting brittle, and those blue bins that we've got.
Yeah, I know mine is pretty worn out.
Right. So we're looking at options. Our recycling truck is at the end of its service life. We need to replace it this year, and we're really trying to determine whether or not staying the course is the right action, or if we should take a look at evolving our service into a single stream automated. And to explain what that is, single stream means that instead of separating recyclables, that they all get collected at once. There's no separation at the home. And those materials will end up being transported to a separation facility where there's staff and machinery that segregates the materials. Generally, the benefit to that is it's much easier for the residents to recycle. You just put it in one container and away you go. The other part of that is the automated part. And the automated recycling vehicles, and I'm sure some of you listeners out there have seen this type of equipment if you don't live in the city. But it's a truck with an arm, and the arm reaches out and grasps a larger container and dumps it into the truck so that the operator doesn't have to climb in and out of the truck at every stop. The cans are uniform in size and color, and for the operator, they're not climbing in and out and putting themselves at risk every time, especially this time of the year, slipping on the ice and falling down.
Would there be, to switch over to this type of system, how long would it take, and what would be the cost to the city to do so?
Well, the primary cost to the city is the cost of the containers themselves. The cost of the truck is slightly higher, but it's not terribly significant compared to the whole price of the truck. The cost of the bins is about $50 to $55 per household, per bin. And so as this process is reviewed and the committee eventually makes a recommendation, the finance committee and the alderpersons will have to decide if we go this route, how the purchase of the bins would be financed.
How has it been done in other communities? Are there area communities that already have this type of a system in place?
Sure. Wausau just got theirs into place. Stevens Point's been doing it for quite a while. And it really depends on the community. Some communities use contract services, and so the cost of the bin is just put into the price of the contract. And so the amount that the city pays on a monthly basis, it's all inclusive. That's typically the way a lot of communities have done it. Is they'll the community, the city will either contract the service, or the city will do a bond notice or a bond issue for the purchase of the units, so that there's no immediate out-of-pocket cost to the property owner. But there's many ways to do it. It can be done as a special fee. It can be done as a bond issue. We can try to work within the budget that we have and make some adjustments. So there's a number of ways to handle it.
Has the committee or the council indicated a direction they'd like to go in this, or is this still in the embryonic stage of discussion?
This is very preliminary. I met with the Public Works Committee here a few weeks ago and presented a report that talks about the pros and cons of of both systems, some of the costs. Right now, the recycling market is light, and so recyclables are hard to sell, which means that the fees to the city are a little higher, and that does have some impact on how efficient an automated system is versus a more standard. So that report is currently available on the city's website, and I would encourage, and I know our alderpersons are encouraging the public to take a look at that report. Obviously, if there were to be a change in service, any change is going to require a pretty significant public education piece to inform the public about the size of the bins, how easy they are to move around, to get some comfort in that if that's the direction the city goes, as well as where to place them and what collection might look like.
Okay, how long typically does it take to implement? Once you decide to go a certain way, how long would the implementation of that new process take?
I would say that if the council made a decision in March, we may be able to get the program implemented by mid to late fall. There's generally quite a time lag between when you can order a truck and when it comes in. But there's also a significant effort in once the carts are received, they need to be assembled. The technology that the city would likely use, it has a radio frequency ID tag embedded in the cart, and so each cart is tabulated and recorded, and then each location that it's dropped at is noted. So each cart has belongs to a location, and then the delivery of the carts. We have about 6,400 residential stops to make, and delivering those carts is going to take some time as well.
Eventually, would this have a payback to the city? Would this become more efficient and thus save money?
Yes. There's it saves in a number of ways, and some of them are somewhat intangible. Generally, with the automated recycling, and the containers themselves are very convenient, and people are much more likely to recycle just because of the convenience. So the real savings there is that our landfills don't get filled up as quickly and can stay open longer. So that's a major factor. Right now, with the soft recycling market, it's hard to say that the recyclables will generate a lot more. But if we roll the clock back a few years, and hopefully once oil prices come back up, the value of those recyclables also comes up, and there would most likely be some cost savings there. There's also some potential savings in work comp loss. The city's been very fortunate. The staff that the city has experienced a number of slip and falls, but the city's fortunate that we haven't had a significant number of work comp type claims. That's always a risk for any staff member that's getting in and out of a vehicle, and especially one for those that are getting in and out of a vehicle, 600-700 times a day.
Would this result in a staff reduction on the people that would? And does that mean some people might lose their jobs, or how would this be handled?
Well, through the recycling program, we currently have one operator in the vehicle.
Right.
When it comes to garbage, if the garbage trucks have several more years of good life in them yet, and this discussion would take place again when it was time to take a look at what we're going to do for garbage. We currently do have 2 people on the vehicle for garbage. That would be able to be reduced to 1. And it's some significant savings, but there are some other issues that the city would have to think long and hard about. For example, our large items being picked up, the frequency of that. Right now we have 2 people to do that, and that works very well in the trucks that we currently have. There becomes some problems, where if we're picking up just the cans, if it's not in the can, it doesn't get picked up. And so, communities have approach that many different ways, but there would be some complications, especially with our garbage collection.
Your Honor, this sounds like a Lean Six Sigma project.
Well, there are aspects of it. When you
because
think about,
you talk about efficiency.
Yeah, you think about routes. You think about time spent on those routes. Are there opportunities to capture that time and use it elsewhere, right? We talk about reducing the number of staff, let's say, on garbage, because obviously that's the next domino to fall once you deal with the pressing need of recycling because of the age of the recycling truck, would be the garbage trucks and their replacement cycle. And at that point, if you can move that manpower to another street's function, the residents gain, right? The residents win because you've got a more efficient service on the one hand, technically and theoretically, but then you can also allocate those resources. We've got them budgeted, so the reality is you can move those dollars to another function within city government.
In other words, someone might not be working on garbage pickup anymore. They'd still be working, but they'd be doing something else.
Yeah. Well, and like Joe referred, we have a very robust bulk item pickup in the city, and that's uncommon for municipalities to pick up everything that's at the curb. A lot of municipalities, for good reasons, workman's comp injuries and others, that service is not performed, or it's performed in a much more rigid fashion than it is today. Because there's a cost, as that never puts any bulk items at the curb, or like many residents across the city are in effect subsidizing that service for others. So there will be a big conversation about that in the future, and encourage residents on any matter, whether it's just the recycling piece of it today, to as Joe mentioned, check out that report that gives you some data and some information about our program. It's very informative, but it also lays it all out. It's very comprehensive in looking at the issue.
Well, looks like if other communities have already been doing it, we're kind of like a little bit behind.
We're probably one of the few last to the party, I would say. Looking at Madison addressed this, and there was a major benefit to their employees because they had, unfortunately for them, a lot of workman's comp injuries and claims, which are very, very costly. And no employee wants that to happen to themselves, because an injury is an injury, and we don't want them.
We're going to take our last break, but if you have any questions about any of our topics that we've been talking about, whether it be the airport or recycling, give us a call at 715-424-2600 or pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. You're listening to The Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and WFHR.com. So welcome back to The Morning Magazine. We're getting our monthly Wisconsin Rapids update. Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink is here, as well as Airport Manager Jeremy Sickler and Joe Terry, Director of Public Works. And if you have any questions about the topics we've been talking about, give us a call at 715-424-2600 or pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. Okay, recycling's okay. That's a big one. What other things are down the road that you're working on, Joe, that people should be aware about or want to weigh in on?
Well, we're working right now with our wastewater utility, doing a full-blown rate review, trying to determine where wastewater comes from and what it costs to treat, so that we're charging both residential, commercial, and industrial companies and fairly. That's been a big project. We've been working on that for some time.
How often do you have to do something like that? Are there state rules that say you need to update your rate structure periodically?
Well, we're required every year to confirm that our rate structure is sufficient to operate the utility. But traditionally, the city's wastewater utility has served its residential community, and recently, the last number of years, more of the industrial community as well. And there's some challenges with that. There's different types of effluent, different types of nutrients in that effluent, and it needs to be treated differently depending on its contents. And those are some of the complications that are new to the city. And so in the past, the rates are reviewed. Treatment is pretty consistent. But now we've got some treatment challenges, and as we're looking at the age of the infrastructure, really trying to take a look at the next 20, 30, 40 years out, what sanitary sewers need to be replaced, lift stations. A lot of that infrastructure is being aged. So we want to have a sustainable system, and we can't move forward with blinders on, thinking that it doesn't cost anything. But at the same time, we want the rate structure to be very reasonable and as low as possible. So that's a big project that we're undertaking.
Where is the oldest infrastructure in this? Is that on the west side, east side, or where are some of the biggest problems in the immediate future?
The immediate future really is the west side lift station.
Okay.
That's a age facility. It's at the end of its service life, and there's a river crossing involved. So that's going to be a very substantial project. And then we're trying to do our best to take a look at the age of the infrastructure under the streets, be it sanitary sewer or water main or storm sewer, and try to time that so that the life of the street expires at a similar time frame as the life of the infrastructure. And that's something that we really haven't been challenged with in the past. Just because our parents and grandparents installed the stuff and it lasts around 100 years, in some cases we're going through our first go-round of replacement.
Well, you found that out with some of those street projects that you've been working on, haven't you? That you, once you dug them up, you found out that underneath there was some pretty old infrastructure.
Right. And it's always a challenge, especially some of the infrastructure that you can't inspect. Sanitary sewer, at least you can run a camera through. The water system is much more challenging for Water and Light to determine, what's the life expectancy for different types of pipe and different soil conditions when you can't even see it. So there's certainly a challenge there.
Is the council, Mayor, going to have to develop a long-range strategy on this?
No question. It's part of a very much more broader look at our capital improvements plan. City has done this in a variety of capacities over the last number of years, and so this is a critical component. Talk about the under river crossing and some of those other major investments like lift stations. Those things all have a design capacity and a useful life, and no different than a pool or any other subject that you've got to plan for its replacement, not only its maintenance, but it's also its replacement.
Since you mentioned the pool, we got in the time remaining, any update on the public input on where the direction we're going to go?
Probably could have started our show that way. It's a big issue.
I know it's a huge one.
So it's an issue that the city council is committed to dealing with. We realize that you just can't. It's not a simple decision. You can't on a whim just decide. You've got to really take a good look at the issue. So on Monday, actually, our researcher that was in town to do some focus groups in January now has gone on the phones. So the researcher's phoning 400 city residents for their opinion on aquatics, and there's a number of issues or aspects that they're looking to address. One of which is the question of indoor versus outdoor. Do people have a strong preference indoor versus outdoor? And maybe there's a mixture sort of component that we can arrive at. The indoor component on the table that has been discussed and shared is a possibility of partnering with the YMCA's expansion of their facility in Wisconsin Rapids. So there's a possibility there's an option for residents to share their input on that subject. And then location, taking a look at where do people feel their likelihood of using that facility, if it's in its kind of current place today near Mead Pool, or where Mead Pool is at today near Mead School. Or is there another location throughout the city that they feel would serve our needs very well? And then the big question, the really important question, is what's our ability to finance? Do we feel that it's an important enough resource or asset for the community to finance it on an annual basis? Because any infrastructure asset such as this will require the city to bond for it. We do intend to solicit private funding and support for the project. However, there will be a city public finance component to the project regardless if we do indoor or outdoor. So we're asking that question as well. And then following the the phone surveys, we're also going to initiate an email survey. So folks that don't get a phone call still can weigh in and share their perspectives on aquatics.
Okay, we got a call. So let's good morning. You're on the Morning Magazine.
Yeah, good morning. I heard you briefly talking about the intersection thing with the lights over there on 17th and Grand.
Mm-hmm.
Another bad one I just wanted to make mention is 12th Street and the expressway. There's many times we travel that, but you got the Lincoln kids and you got St. Vincent with the school and everything, but there's many times when you come to 12th and Express and you're sitting there like you kind of mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And, the light just doesn't change. And there's no traffic even coming either way on the expressway. So I'm just all for them checking into the timing of these intersections that are like that and just wanted to make that known.
Okay, Joe.
Sure. Some of these intersections also that some signals will change when traffic approaches from a side street, and on the expressway, some of those signals are linked together, so they're part of a system. So if traffic comes up to one intersection, even if that intersection seems empty, it doesn't necessarily trigger a change right away, just because it's part of a multi-intersection system.
Okay. Well, that's something we have to study to see how we can make it more efficient, in other words.
Yeah, yes. So hopefully that'd be a great thing. So I just wanted to mention it for this end of town. So thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you for your phone.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, and that's the kind of input. So anybody, first off, we'll start with Jeremy. If somebody out there in the business community or in the flying community has some thoughts about future airport needs or what they would like to see happen at Alexander Field, you want to give them your phone number or where they could reach you and talk to you?
Yeah, absolutely. The phone number out at the field is 715-423-0330, and I'd be happy to hear from anybody who has any aviation interest.
Okay, and when it comes to public works, how can they reach you, Joe?
Well, people can call me directly at 715-421-8255.
Okay. And Mayor, I think that's always works best, doesn't it, to talk directly to the people in charge of these various departments and let them know.
Right. And obviously I'm there if things aren't being resolved or if there's an extra set of eyes that residents care. Please, by all means, call me or call my assistant, and we can look to address the issue as well.
Okay. We got a lot on the table.
No question. It feels a little bit overwhelming, I think, at times, but staff, they're taking it in stride and doing really well to address the issues. Just to close the loop on aquatics real quick.
Sure.
In the absence of Mead Pool this summer, the idea is to try to find some solutions or options for youth to still be engaged over the summer in a sort of structured way. And so we're working with a couple of partners right now and hope to have something late March on that note, so students and kids and parents and families can start thinking about what their youth might be doing for the summer in the absence of the pool.
And then you want to, of course, the transportation issues will be an important part of that whole equation.
Definitely part of the problem, or will have to be part of the solution. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's been an interesting morning, and well, actually, today wraps up your second term.
Yeah, well, no, actually,
you will be
in April.
Okay.
Yeah, the third Tuesday in April is when the term effectively
Okay,
wraps.
but I mean, like, so. But I mean, in terms of this show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I came on.
Yeah. Well, it will either be you or Mr. Nash, but this station wants to continue with you or with the new. If there's a new mayor, depending on what the citizens of this city do, we want to continue this conversation. I think it's very useful for folks to.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a direct way to hear from City Hall and to inform us of opinions and for us to do the same.
Okay, and anything else that you're looking for input right now directly from the public, that especially the city or council or departments could use some help?
The heroin and opiate issue remains on our front burner as well, and we didn't get to talk about it much on the show, but that group will be meeting again next week to address the pillared approach that the police department is leading on right now, which includes a lot of stakeholders, and so that issue again is on our radar next week.
That could be a special program, in fact.
Yeah.
Maybe bring some of the stakeholders in here and
to update as to the progress on that. Absolutely. You know, the interesting thing about that work is it's not always seen. It's definitely behind the scenes, as is most law enforcement in the complex issues with that. Just as kind of a note to the community, had a great opportunity to sit down with the new CEO at Aspire Riverview Hospital yesterday afternoon. Got a good tour of the facility again and to talk about what might be on the horizon there. Very excited about their new leadership's energy and enthusiasm, and really viewing this community as an opportunity to be a hub for healthcare. And so it's nice to get a little bit of insight on what's going on in his mind. He's also been on the job for 6 weeks here in the community, so real fresh. He's from Iowa, is his most recent stint in healthcare administration, but definitely have an able and an energetic leader at the hospital here in the community.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, a very interesting conversation this morning. I enjoyed it, and thank you for your time, and have a good week.
All right, Carl. Thank you.
And with that, we're going to wrap up the Morning Magazine. We'll join CBS right after this.